Hey everybody, did you know there's a theory in physics that explains everything about the universe very simply? I can't find it anymore online. I think it's been scrubbed by the gatekeepers, but I'm here to tell you the theory, and I want you to let me know if it makes more sense or less sense than what the current idea about the universe is. Now, I can't remember the name of the theory, but it's very simple. It says that basically photons exist. They're a thing, they're like a little rod, and their movement through the media of space can explain everything about physics. But it requires you believing that space is a liquid and not a fabric somehow. So let me explain to you how it works and how it can explain everything we understand about the universe, including magnetic fields and how protons are held together. So, this is a photon. These are the only things that exist. They look like a rod and they can move. Now, they can move through the medium of space frictionlessly, meaning there's no resistance to their movement. But they can be affected by the waves of space. They can be pushed in different directions, but they can move freely forward. So what that means is when a photon is moving through space, it's being propelled by a wave. This wave of space hits the photon and starts to move it forward. And because all waves in a uniform media propagate at the same speed, meaning in this case the speed of space is 186 or 8 times the speed of space is 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. That means every single photon is being pushed at that speed. When a photon is being pushed by the wave of the universe, it doesn't just go forward, it's a wave. So it kind of hits it and moves it much like a surfer on a wave. It does this, pushes a photon down, then it comes up. And so when a photon is considered to be a wave and a particle, it's a particle that's moving like a wave because it's surfing the liquid of the universe. Now, as this photon's moving through the liquid of the universe, it acts just like a boat in the water. It has a bow wake and a rear wake. I forget what the rear wake is called. Bow wake and a stern wake. So when a boat is moving through water, it has a bow wake and the stern wake. Here's a picture of it. Photons do the same thing. As they're moving, space around them is rippling. This ripples propagate through all space because there's nothing to stop it. The only thing that exists are photons. This is it. Whatever you want to call a photon, a piece of source, whatever, this is the only thing that exists. And it's affected by how the universe moves. So, when a wave of the universe is really big, it hits the photon, causing it to move at a great vibration, as they call it. This energy vibration, when the photon hits something, it has both the forward speed impact, but also has a photon size impact. So if a photon hits straight right here, like in the famous equation E equals mc squared, then the energy of the potential energy and the kinetic energy should all be applied to one point. But it's not, it's bent, which means when it hits something and it's bent, the kinetic energy goes this way, but it also goes this way or this way. So something like a radio wave has the photon bending a line. When it hits something, most of the energy is dissipated in the opposite direction. Why radio waves have very small energy. Whereas something else like a cosmic ray or UV, stuff like that, it has a much smaller vibration. So when it hits, most of the energy is this way, not much this way. So as this photon is moving through space, creating a wake, this wake is affecting other photons. Now, in order to generate a certain size wake of energy, like if you want to make a radio versus a laser, the radio generator collects photons. So I have more photons here. It collects them together, but not in a high density, and they start to move in the same way. When it's released as a radio wave, those photons are moving as a radio wave. However, if you do something like a laser, instead of having just a few energized before you let it go, you have a lot. You have a lot in a small space. And because you have so many, they can't move as much. They're starting to sync up in a much smaller wavelength. So when they accelerate, they have a lot more energy. Even light, which normally can't hurt you, you get a lot of light in a small spot, that increases the energy vibration, and it, boom, it hits with most of its energy going that way and not that way or that way like a radio wave. Now, in order to make a proton, since space is a liquid, what you have to do is you have to get a lot of photons together. And with all these photons inside a small area of space, it acts just like an air bubble under the water. There's more photons displacing space than the outside. So the bubble of space acts like an air bubble. It can't quite close in on those photons. There's not enough pressure. And thus, a proton is formed with the photons basically spinning in a circle inside the proton. They're just flying around at the speed of light because they're still being carried, but because they're in a bubble, they're just going in a circle. That's a proton. And because you have a lot of photons in a proton moving the same way, it creates a vibration in space. This wave of space is much like a boat bobbing up and down. Depending on how big the waves are, is what determines what energy gets through, because if the energy wave is really big, the photon will get stuck. So if you have a big wave, photon comes in and it gets stuck. This is what electrons are. So as the photons inside the proton are causing the universe wake to vibrate out from the proton, the depth of the wake means that photons get collected inside this wake and enough photons form an electron. And no, electrons are not particles. It's literally just a bag of photons waiting to be used. So, what do you think? Does this simple idea of photons moving through the liquid of space answer most of the questions in physics? Or is the electrical universe or whatever crap you can find online more accurate? Tell me, what do you think the gatekeepers want you to know? The truth or something else?